And I'm going to jump right in. This topic, it's a hot topic. It involves two things I absolutely love. Okay, food, okay, which is so important to me, and science. So it's hard not to love food, right? I mean, it's comforting, it's nourishing, it's delicious, it's hardwired into our cultural practices. It's become kind of like my companion in the car, at my desk, in front of the TV, when I'm on the go. Um, and our relationships with food have lost some of their boundaries. Boundaries is a hot term right now. And I think our lack of personal space has come to hurt us as we overeat and we're gaining weight. So we use food as a crutch, kind of as a friend or a filler, and we forget that food is ultimately our source of fuel. It is what helps us be our best in an increasing chaotic world. So, one way to help us kind of reevaluate our relationship with food and get back on better terms is fasting. Fasting involves a period of not consuming any calorie containing foods, and the practice of intermittent fasting helps to train the body by mindfully teaching the body when to be hungry. So I want to be clear that I am not recommending anybody start intermittent fasting or stop or do anything of that nature. I simply want to share the science so you can make an informed decision. But please make sure that you consult your healthcare provider before making any dietary changes whatsoever. So the science of, intermittent fasting itself, the signal of thumbs up or thumbs down has remained rather murky. I'll be honest with you. When I dove into this topic for personal reasons, because I want to maintain my weight, I'm, in my 50s and doing my thing. But I've noticed that, stuff sticks to my body more than it ever has before. So I dove into this research really wanting a defined answer, but what I found is that it is murky due to the quality of the evidence, which often involves really small sample sizes or short intervention periods, or even variations in the study design. Often, many of the studies I found lacked a control group, or there was a different fasting protocol. And we'll talk about the different types of fasting. And the scientists are doing it all sorts of ways. And then the participants themselves are showing up with varying shapes and sizes. So I really didn't, get a firm answer. It kind of went back and forth, but I just want you to know I have done my absolute due diligence and read so many countless research studies. I think over 300 research studies. I've read 6 books. I've listened to podcasts, TED Talks, you name it, blogs. And what I'm going to foundationally refer to is Mark Mattson, who is the Johns Hopkins neuroscientist who has studied intermittent fasting for almost over 30 years. I use a lot of Dr. Eric Berg in my talk today. Michael Mosley, he's got a TV documentary called Eat Fast, Live Longer. I loved the Fast Diet book by Kate Harrison. This is about her personal journey using the 5-2 method of intermittent fasting. And then lastly, I really like Dr. Jason Fung's bestseller, The Obesity Code. He does a great job combining plenty of research, his clinical experience, and just some really good, sensible nutrition advice. He's real clear that we need to make sure we're eating more veggies, fruits, fiber, healthy proteins, and fats. And bottom line, we need to avoid sugar, refined grains, processed foods, and for God's sake, stop snacking is his mantra that I think he says about 500 times in his book. Additionally, I found multiple, so it's a research review, a Cochrane review, 2 different sites. So Journal of American Medicine had an analysis of over 130 randomized trials. And then in Neurology Today, there was a lot of studies about this too. So just a menagerie of sources, but I want to make sure that you understand that I'm only going to talk about the science and the evidence of what I have found. I didn't necessarily go to an Instagram post that didn't have studies backing it. So what you're going to hear me talk about today, hopefully, will be some good knowledge for you to make an informed decision about intermittent fasting. So I'm going to share the history, the types of intermittent fasting, some pros and cons, the science behind, what's going on in your body when you are doing intermittent fasting or fasting, and some consistent rules that showed up in the evidence during my research. So fasting has been a practice throughout human evolution. Ancient hunters and gatherers didn't have supermarkets or refrigerators like we do. There's not food available year round, and sometimes they couldn't find anything to eat. And so as a result, humans evolved to be able to function without food for extended periods of time. And it used to be a lot easier to maintain your healthy weight, right? When there was no computers and TV shows. I remember when our TV kind of like turned off at 11 p.m. and it kind of became this like gray and white snow, where the programming ended for the day and people stopped eating and they went to bed and portions were smaller, and people played outside more. They got more exercise. But now we have the internet and TV and other entertainment available 24/7. And many adults and children stay awake longer to watch TV or scroll through social media like I did last night instead of reviewing this talk for the 455th time. People are playing games and they're chatting online. And this gives us a wonderful opportunity to sit and snack all day and all night. So these extra calories and less activity can, mean a lot of things for our society. We have a higher risk of obesity, type 2 diabetes is on the climb, heart disease, and other illnesses. And so some of the scientific studies that I'm going to talk about today did show that intermittent fasting may help reverse some of these trends. So that is good news. Many cultures have known about the benefits of fasting before science ever proved it, that's for sure. I want to make for mention of that. People fast for religious or spiritual reasons. You fast if you have lab work or a procedure or diagnostic testing or even surgery, right? And when you're sick, you really have no appetite. Even the body recognizes that sometimes you just don't need to be eating. Even this dude, Plato, right? Plato and Socrates talk about the benefits of fasting in multiples of their writing. So this is not new news. This is just before the science has come out. I do want to make sure that people understand that there are some people that just should not fast. People who are underweight to begin with, or maybe somebody who has an unhealthy relationship with food or eating disorder or distorted eating habits. Anybody that's like a brittle diabetic that has problems controlling their sugar, or people with irregular periods that are trying to conceive, I would say be mindful of that because fasting does impact your hormone levels. And bottom line, I'll say it again, make sure you consult a healthcare provider. I do think that there are certain groups that should be monitored when they're doing their fasting. Anybody that has gout, or anybody with a serious illness such as liver disease, kidney disease, or heart disease. I think it's important to, manage your medicines throughout that, or type 1 and type 2 diabetes. So let's talk a little bit about the types of fasting. So intermittent fasting is an eating pattern. Most of you probably recognize this, or you probably wouldn't have joined me if you didn't know what I was talking about. And what it is there's periods of eating and then there's periods of not eating. Intermittent fasting does not specify what foods you should eat, but rather just when you should be eating them. The most common type of intermittent fasting is 16 and 8. And this is when people fast for 16 hours and eat for 8, and they repeat that every single day. There is an 18 and 6. This is what I tend to do. I used to do the 16 and 8, and I would break my fast around 11 o'clock for lunch at work, and then I would quit eating about 7. But what I found is I would eat dinner right when I got home because I was starving and wanted to bite somebody's face off. And so I would eat, but then since I had till 7, I would have another snack. And so with doing the 18 and 6, basically I break my fast at lunch at work and I go home and eat dinner. And then I'm done eating for the day. Some other methods are alternate day fasting, where you eat normally every other day. So on days in between, you just eat about 25% of your daily calorie needs in one meal. So if you consume, let's say, 1,800 calories, that's what you should be eating Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. You eat 450 calories on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Another approach that I read about in a book done by a journalist is that 5-2 approach. where you eat normally for 5 days in a row. And then for 2 days in a row, you fast for 24 hours. You have one meal and then you go back into your fast again for another 24 hours. And then lastly, I think, there's some 24 to 72 hour fasts. And the purpose of these longer fasts is really to keep insulin down and go after that stored sugar. If you're familiar with Dr. Fung and his book, Obesity Code, I'll kind of refer to it quite a bit. One of his key strategies for releasing that long-standing weight is fasting for a longer period. So if you're a person that has, you're extremely, weight loss resistant, I guess you could say, according to the science, this would be the type of fasting that could potentially get you unstuck from that weight loss journey that you're on. So there's multiple different ways of doing it. There's more than I've even listed here. There's Eat, Stop, Eat. There is where you eat just one meal a day, which is, I call it just 24. But it just is all about eating and not eating. And I'm going to go through what happens in the body at these different time periods, and that will kind of help you decide if you are going to try fasting, what you would be interested in doing. So the science does say that there are a lot of benefits to fasting. So this is good news, right? According to the science, fasting can reduce insulin resistance by lowering the blood sugar from 3 to 6% in any of the studies that I looked at. And it can also reduce your fasting insulin levels by 20 to as much as 31%, I found in a couple of different studies, which should protect us against type 2 diabetes. In fact, experimental research in adult males with type 2 diabetes, and this was a really good study done with almost 12,000 people, showed that the potential for intermittent fasting as a therapeutic approach to maybe reduce the need for insulin therapy. So really well done study, and I loved it, and that's just a great thing. The evidence also showed that many people that do intermittent fasting have an increase in their focus and a reduction in the inflammatory process in the body. A key factor in chronic illnesses. So any reduction in inflammation in the body is a good thing. I also found in 22 different research studies that it can help lower your bad LDL cholesterol, your blood triglycerides, your blood sugar and insulin resistance. And these are all risk factors for heart disease. So fasting can help your heart. The National Institute of Health, there's a database, and it has about 26,000 adult males in this database. And over a 16-year period, they followed these men, and it suggests that reducing your late night eating through time-restricted eating may also significantly reduce the risk of heart disease in this 26,000 men. So pretty good news there. It also can help boost your immune system. Some of the studies that I reviewed that I thought were well done showed that alternate day fasting can reduce the risk of cancer by slowing down the development of lymphoma, also limiting tumor survival and slowing down the actual spread of cancerous cells in some different types of cells besides lymphoma. So that's also great news. Additionally, I found in my research that there is brain health that is improved. Fasting increases your BDNF hormone in the brain, and this can help with the growth of new nerve cells. And it can also protect against Alzheimer's disease, according to 6 different studies. Additionally, a benefit of fasting is it can slow down the aging process. And I'll talk a little bit more about how this happens. But studies did show that fasted rats lived between 20 to 36% longer than rats that did not fast. There also is a great TED Talk about slowing down the aging process, fasting, sleep, and some other health benefits that affect your telomeres. And so I find telomeres to be ridiculously interesting. There's something we've kind of, just really recognized the value and understanding recently. So telomeres, the way I like to describe it is like on your shoelaces, you've got that little plastic cap at the end of your shoelace that kind of protects it from fraying. Well, your telomeres are the same thing for your genes, your chromosomes. And so all we are cells being born and cells dying and becoming dilapidated, but your telomeres protect your genes. So when they replicate, they're in better shape. And so they're a protective measure. But what they're finding is that over time, if you're not eating right or doing certain things, those telomeres can get shorter and shorter and shorter and don't protect the chromosomes as cells replicate. And so that puts you at risk for other things. But in fasting, they found that these telomeres are actually protected. And so that is related to slowing down that age. It's complex, but if you go to tedtalks.com, you can Google telomeres on there, not Google, you can search telomeres and aging, and the TED Talk is like 20 minutes long, but it's really well done and super interesting. The last reason a lot of people like to do intermittent fasting is the benefit of weight loss. It's super common. It's easy. It's flexible. It takes zero equipment. It costs you nothing to do it. And for me, I found that intermittent fasting just works better in my life. I don't know about you, but I get stressed out thinking about what's for dinner or what's for this or what's for that. I hate meal planning completely. I don't like to cook. I'm one of those girls that can eat, lunch meat out of a bag leaning against the counter, and I'm totally fine, and dinner is done. So for fasting, it's easy because I can just say, well, I'm fasting, I'm not eating. So it's just less meal planning for me. And I know that sounds like a lazy way to do it, but it really does work for me. Intermittent fasting can also change your hormone levels to make weight loss a lot easier. In addition to lowering the insulin levels and increasing your growth hormone levels, the release of these fat-burning hormones called norepinephrine is also increased. And so short-term fasting, according to the research articles that I reviewed, can increase your metabolic rate by 3.6% to as high as 14% in a study. And by helping you eat less and burn more calories, most people were able to lose between 3 to 8% of their body weight in about 3 to 24 weeks, depending upon the study. So I'm sharing general numbers because I don't want to just quote one study. I think looking at the body of evidence is so very important. But if you're going to do intermittent fasting, for weight loss, there are some things to keep in mind that I noticed in the studies. Food quality stands out. The food you eat is still very important. So try to eat mostly whole single ingredient foods if you're doing it for weight loss. And then you also need to be consistent, just like any other weight loss method. You need to make sure you're doing it for a long time if you want it to work. And then the third thing that showed up in the research review was don't binge. Remember that the main reason for your success is that you're eating fewer calories overall. So if you binge when you are able to eat and you're fasting, you can not lose any weight at all. So they found that people that did some binge eating when they were able to eat, they didn't lose weight at all. So that kind of makes sense. So because knowledge is really powerful, I want to go in and give you a detailed description of what happens during extended fasts and including the different stages of the fast. So you can kind of expect, an understanding. And I think that when I understand something more, I'm more apt to do it because I'm like, I know this is happening right now. And so it makes sense to me and I want to do it. So the first stage is 0 and stage 1 is really that first section of 12 to 18 hours. So the human body's main preferred source of energy is glycogen. We love ourselves some glycogen, which is stored in the form of glucose, a type of sugar that you get from carbohydrates that you eat, right? So when you digest your food, your body breaks down carbohydrates into glucose, which is stored as glycogen in the muscles and in the liver. And as long as you have glycogen stored up, that's what your body will use to give it the energy to function. I do want to kind of pause here real quick and talk about during this stage, stage 1, 12 to 18 hours into your fast, some hormone things that are happening. In the few hours after eating, your insulin will rise, right? And it's telling your body to break down that glucose for energy. But after about 12 hours of fasting, your insulin will drop. And you have a hormone called leptin, which is responsible for telling you, oh, I'm so full, my tummy's so full, I'm not hungry, that will fall during this period, the 12 to 18 period. So that leptin falls and you're like, dang, I'm hungry. And then this other hormone called ghrelin signals yourself to become hungry. So it's that feeling of full and feeling of hungry. Both of those kick in in this stage of 12 to 18 hours, and they dissipate later in your fasting. But remember that this will kick in during this stage, and to, drink water, coffee, or tea, or amuse yourself with household chores, or, keep yourself busy when this does happen, and know that it comes in waves. It will pass. You'll get a push of leptin in your body, or a push of ghrelin in your body, and it will go away and it will dissipate. So just, it comes and goes. But the second stage of fasting, which is the 18 to 24 hour stage, it takes place when you start to burn through your glycogen stores. So once that happens, your body needs to turn to another source for fuel. And so after about 4 hours, when you've stopped eating, your body will use a process called lipolysis for energy. And lipolysis is the breaking down of triglycerides, which is a type of lipid or fat. So your body will break down fats to use that for fuel, okay? It will also break down amino acids, which is the compounds that form proteins, for energy. But that will only last so long too. So after about 18 hours, your body will transition into a state called ketosis, which is when it starts to rely on fat as its primary form of energy. In this process of breaking down the fat for fuel, your body will release ketones, or molecules that your liver produces from the fatty acids that you've been storing. And then after this stage, your insulin levels will remain low, but your glucagon, a hormone that controls blood sugar, will start to rise and prevent your blood glucose from dropping too low. So the body is so smart. It's so intuitive, and it will do all these fantastic things without us even knowing. Now, as you continue fasting, if you were to do a long fast, in stage 3, which is 24 to 48 hours of your fast, your body starts to do something that I think is super interesting. It starts to repair itself. This is a process called autophagy, which is when your cells start to get rid of any components that are old, damaged, or not functioning right. I call this like the garage sale stage. Basically, you got a garage sale, or you're on Facebook and you're giving things away for free. I'm on one of those free sites, and I will just post things, flash sale or flash free. And if I clean something out, I just literally put it out on my driveway and put my address down and have people come and get it. Well, your body is doing this. Autophagy is incredibly important for our health. And it shows up in the research as being able to reduce inflammation, kill cancer cells, and clear out all the misfolded proteins that can cause Alzheimer's. Autophagy declines naturally with age. And so it's thought that fasting can induce this autophagy. And it can also reduce the effects of aging. And indeed, studies have shown that fasting is connected to living a longer life. Rats live longer, and we're studying humans at this point too. So after 48 hours, your body will go into long-term fasting state, and a few things will happen as a result. First, your growth hormone levels will go up significantly. This is going to stimulate faster muscle repair. It's going to preserve your lean muscle mass. This is also thought to be related to your ghrelin, that hormone, that hunger hormone. And that hunger hormone can also start producing growth hormone. So remember that ghrelin will continue to rise and fall throughout the day, lower and lower and lower. And your hunger levels will start to kind of break in this period where you're no longer feeling hungry in this stage 3 or 4. In stage 5, after 54 hours, your insulin levels will be at their lowest point yet. Your ketone levels will increase further and prevent muscle breakdown, and your body will break down those branched chain amino acids for energy. It's worth noting that the advantages of having your insulin level be low is something, that can happen as a result of a prolonged high level of insulin. So this can lead to diabetes. In contrast, this is what happens when you fast. You can have a healthier body fat percentage, reduce inflammation. And it's just this section right here, what's happening in your body is absolutely amazing. once you've got to the end point of this 72-hour fast, you're going to see one more benefit. And that stage is your IGF-1, which is your insulin-like growth factor. This is a hormone that's involved in growth and development, and it will decrease, okay? And this decrease in this hormone can trigger stem cell production. You can create new immune cells. You can reduce oxidative stress, which is something that has been thought to prevent aging and diseases like cancer. But before you get too excited about these, extended fasting periods, I want to make sure that you understand that this is a serious undertaking and shouldn't be done without medical supervision. In reviewing some of the studies done on extended fasting, I did see some themes of what people did that helped make them more successful. So I just want to touch on those real quickly. A lot of the evidence says that you have to stay hydrated. While your body goes through 72 hours without food, you do not want to deprive it of the electrolytes that it needs to remain hydrated. So maintaining your electrolytes is super important. And many of the research studies I read that people would take a pinch of salt in their water to keep those electrolytes. In addition, if you have a 72-hour fast, if you do a prolonged fast, it shows up in the research that you should have a plan on how you're going to break your fast. And bone broth, which is thought to be immune boosting and anti-inflammatory and super easy on your stomach, is a common way that people during the research would break a long fast. And then, of course, speak to your doctor, because ultimately you're going to need to help somebody guide you through what medications to take, maybe monitor some labs if you are going to do an extended fast. I want to talk about this dude right here. I'm going to hurt his name. I'm certain of it. Oshani Osumi. So even if you're like an avid follower of health and wellness like me, there's a good chance you might not have heard of autophagy. It wasn't until 2016 when this guy got the Nobel Prize for identifying autophagy and the mechanisms for how our body gets, removes waste, that I knew anything about this. So our cells are constantly being damaged throughout the day. And so this is just a normal bodily process, right? So when we have energy conservation, or we're trying to digest food or fight something in our immune system, we have damaged cells. And what happens is we need a regular generation of new young cells in order to perform at an optimal level. However, age, stress, increased exposure to food and chemicals and all of this, we have free radicals, in our body. And these in turn causes them to compromise cells at a faster rate. And as a result, the body needs some way of getting rid of these damaged cells. So enter autophagy, right? The body employs natural mechanisms to clear out that damaged and unperforming cells that are lingering. Remember, I talked about the garage sale. So if these are not removed, they can trigger inflammation in the body and prevent the body from carrying out normal tasks, right? And it leads to the development of other diseases. So it's super, super important that, we maintain this. I love the fact that research showed that a 16-hour overnight intermittent fast coupled with a low protein day right after that 16-hour fast can help trigger autophagy. So you don't have to go into this long, long fast, a 16-hour fast with low protein. And you can keep this going by alternating between periods of low protein consumption and moderate protein consumption and keep that autophagy going. So when fasting, that level of glucose in the body is low. And so therefore, so is insulin, right? And the lowered insulin is what triggers the glucagon. And then that's the body's natural hormone that will help stabilize these blood sugars. And this presence of that hormone is what causes the autophagy. And this connection to protein is an added benefit of a protein cycling that, is so, so important. And I didn't know anything about protein cycling, so I thought it would be important to kind of mention it now. So protein cycling is when you choose 3 non-consecutive low protein days. You fast overnight into the morning for at least 16 hours, and then you limit your protein intake for the remainder of the day to 25 grams, for the average adult. And then the remaining 4 days of the week, you have just a normal protein intake, preferably unprocessed whole foods too, that can, definitely complement this longevity strategy. So this is a way we can send ourselves into autophagy just after a 16-hour fast, is by going low protein. So I thought that was definitely worth sharing and worth trying. There are some other dietary tips to induce autophagy, and it's through the regular use of MCT oil. I have spent money on this, and actually it was a lot of money. It wasn't cheap, and I just can't tolerate it. But it is the nature's richest source of healthy fatty acids, and it converts really easily into ketone bodies, which is a great fuel for your brain and your body. And as a result, that oil can help ease your hunger and stimulate autophagy by increasing ketone levels, especially when you don't have carbohydrates on board. So that was showed significantly in 8 studies. So that is one way to power up your autophagy. And then another way I found in the evidence is by trying green tea. So there are polyphenols like EGCG that you can get in a high quality matcha powder, and you can put that in your morning smoothie, and that will help trigger autophagy also. And then lastly, a super antioxidant rich spice, cinnamon, it's renowned for its blood sugaring, lowering skills. I put cinnamon in my coffee pretty much every morning. It can also increase autophagy, but you're supposed to look for the high quality. So the Ceylon cinnamon is what I buy. It's spelled CEYLON. It's supposed to be considered true cinnamon, and it's like the highest quality, and it can send you into autophagy also. So those are just some ways that you can get around fasting in order to start this garage sale of cells that are damaged and no longer, useful, that are in your basement that you need to get rid of. Just a couple really quick tips. So I want to take just a couple minutes to talk about some takeaways. So in looking at over 300 research articles, all related to fasting and the books, there's some key things that stood out to me, some themes, I guess you could say. And so I want to talk about some of those themes that I saw within my research. So proper intake of water is absolutely vital to your well-being, and the deficiency of just 1%, can present signs of dysfunction in your body. If you think about your brain, which is 75% water, right? Just 2% reduction in your water capacity in your brain leads to dehydration and can cause, a foggy brain. So you need water to maintain, lots of chemical balances in your body, like balancing your acid-base levels, eliminating waste from your lungs and your skin and your colon, especially during a fast. We want to use our lymphatic system to get rid of all that waste, but we need water to be able to make that work well. It also is helpful in regulating our hormones and transporting nutrients to the cells when it needs to. So I thought it was important to kind of note how much water is enough water, right? And it's hard to find, straight across the board message, but the minimum intake of water should be half of your body weight in ounces. But when you're fasting, the science shows that more water is beneficial. So you just want to be super mindful and pay attention. So let's do some math here. So if you weigh 150 pounds, you should drink about 75 ounces of water. But if you're fasting, the research says you should actually double that, which is 150 ounces, which is a lot of water. Remember, you can drink water or tea as long as it has no sugar in it. Carbonated water, I love, like AHA and those Waterloo ones. You can buy at Aldi sometimes. Those are super tasty. But you just look for something that has no calories. And then coffee is okay too, but remember that no sugar, no cream, or anything like that can be used in your coffee. And then, coffee, of course, can be overdone. I'm kind of high energy as it is, so I try to avoid coffee later because I don't want to be too amped up. I love my sleep too. I do another talk about the superpower of sleep, and sleep is really, really valuable, people. I also read that it's super important to be able to, oh, I got a couple questions in the chat. It was distracting. We're doing another talk later this month about ADD in women, and I'm going to definitely attend that talk. But I saw that chat box had 2 questions. I'll get to those. But a second takeaway is to make sure that you continue to take your vitamins. There are certain supplements that are important in your fasting. So D, or your vitamin D, is super important. But check with your doctor about taking your medications. But trace minerals, electrolytes, omega-3 fatty acid, they don't have calories, very minimal calories. And so vitamins are okay to take and often pretty important during your fast. And then third, what showed up in the science, and this is why it was so hard to get to the bottom. The science was so murky because some people were allowed in a lot of the studies to continue their fast if they weren't hungry, right? So if you're fasting and your goal was to fast for 16 hours, but you're not hungry, it's great. You actually see more benefits if you can continue that fast, right? But don't go too far. Don't go to when you're weak or tired or irritable, or for heaven's sakes, don't get to the hangry stage. But yeah, definitely eat only when you're hungry. So if you're on a fast and you're doing great, it's important to continue it. According to the science, there's additional benefits that we've talked about, what happens over time with the length of time in which you fast. And then I also discovered that the longer you fast, the more important it is to refeed slowly. So if you do a fast for 48 hours or longer, make sure that when you do eat, you just eat a small amount of food the first 15 minutes and wait, and then gradually have more. And that's because it's been shown to have some digestive upset. So nausea or stomach pain, bloating, if you haven't eaten in 48 hours and you just go on a bender and eat everything that is not nailed down, you can give yourself a stomach ache. And so that's one of the things I saw in the research. Another takeaway that was very clear, and this is not new news, unfortunately, I wish it was something else, but eating well-balanced meals matters. So once you break your fast, you must have a well-balanced meal that provides all those nutrients to your body. So make sure you pay attention to that first meal above all other meals, right when you're breaking your fast. Remember that fiber helps you keep, a full feeling longer. And you also want to keep your blood sugars pretty stable so you don't feel hungry again real soon. Some of the fiber choices I like are chia seeds or some nuts, fruits, and vegetables. But we also want to make sure we're getting good protein in our body. So our body takes time to break down protein. So your blood sugar levels will remain pretty darn stable for a long time and you remain full. And then again, healthy fats showed up. Very important to get some good healthy fats. And you know what? I like healthy fats because it makes my food tasty. And so make sure that you're getting all of these key components when you're breaking your fast. Don't dive into the junk food or the carbs for that matter. And then the research also showed that exercise right before breaking your fast does have some benefits. So exercising during your fasting period will help speed up the weight loss process. And if you don't do that, keep on fasting even after you've worked out, you'll end up losing some muscle mass. So kind of be careful there. But your body is likely to deplete the collagen. In that case, your body is forced to find other energy sources such as fat. And so one study I love that was done by the British Journal of Nutrition found that men who ran before taking their breakfast burned up to 20% more of stored fat than those who ate before they went on the same run. And so I thought that was great. So I do try to exercise in the morning or in the afternoon when I'm going to break my fast. So we discussed who should not fast, right? And we talked about who needed some medical surveillance, but there are some downfalls that showed up in the science too, for fasting. In some research studies, people had complaints of headache or lethargy, crankiness, and some constipation. And the constipation may be just that they were eating less, right? But it's hard to tell because, like I said, some of the studies weren't well done. But I have seen that headaches showed up quite often. I think that the headaches are probably contributable to dehydration. So I don't typically get a headache when I fast, but I do a really good job about drinking my water. Another things that showed up as a con is that you may overeat. There's this really strong biological push to kind of overeat after you've fasted because your appetite hormones and that hunger center in the brain is like in overdrive. He's like, feed me. And so it's human nature too, to want to reward yourself. You're like, oh man, I did this great fast. And then you may tend to overindulge. So just keep that in mind. That is a downfall, that people tend to overeat sometimes after they have fasted. And then if you're an older adult, you may lose too much weight. So that was seen in some of the studies. If you're, marginal as far as your body weight goes, this may not be good for you because it can affect your immune system and your bones, and reported energy levels. So people that are on the smaller or leaner side to begin with. It also can be somewhat dangerous if you're taking certain medications, especially for diabetes, that drops your blood sugar, or cardiac medicines. So certain medicines need to be taken with food, and you want to make sure that you're working with the physician to do that. And then another con of intermittent fasting is that, socially, it's kind of hard to do. I'll be honest with you. I mean, I'll tend to not want to do a social outing if I'm working on a long fast, because I feel uncomfortable when you tell people you're fasting. And then plus there's like all this, tantalizing food that I want to put in my mouth when I'm out there, because we associate food with pleasure and fun. And so I tend to avoid the social outing. So it's a con if you're a social butterfly that likes to eat with friends. It's not something you want to continue doing. So those are some of the cons for intermittent fasting. But in summary, when you look at all of the research that I've read, there are really 4 things that you can do with this information to better your health. Consider a simple form of intermittent fasting. Limit the hours of the day which you eat, and for best effects, make it earlier in the day. That shows up loud and clear in the research. So eat between 7 and 3 or between 10 and 6. Definitely in the research, not eating before bed. That is bad, 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 and had not as good results across the board. So they tend to say, don't break your fast at, 3 o'clock and have your last meal at 10 and then go to bed. None of that research shows out well. And then, the second thing you can do is just plain let your body burn fat between the meals. Stop the snacking. Just don't snack. Be active throughout the day, and, build your muscle tone, because those muscles will help metabolize your food better. So that's a large takeaway. Quit the snacking. And then avoid sugars and refined grains. Instead, you want to eat beans, lentils, whole grains, good proteins, healthy fats. Basically, the Mediterranean style diet is what I wrote here. That is super important in breaking your fast, or just as a baseline. You don't want to go and do all these fasts and then ruin it by eating, things that are not going to give you the nutrients that you need. And so bottom line, I'm saying it again, avoid the snacking and eating at night all the time, for sure. That is going to be the largest takeaways to this information. But what I want to do now is, really kind of open it up for questions or comments. I think I have a couple questions in the chat that I want to refer to. So somebody asked, 25 grams of protein, is that 1 egg? I have no idea. I would have to Google how many proteins are in an egg. If somebody wants to do that and put that in the chat, that would be amazing. I don't know how many grams of protein. I'm not one that necessarily monitors all of my macros. I find it to be a lot of work. And then is organic coconut oil considered a MCT oil? It is not. So MCT oil is a specific type of oil from my understanding. And you can buy that online or through a healthy, like GNC, one of those stores, if you want to do that. I want to know, does anybody, so that's the bulk of the information. Oh, Bonnie, thank you. 6 grams of protein in an egg. So yeah, you're going to be making some chickens pretty mad if you're going to get all 25 grams of your protein from eggs. So 6 grams of protein in 1 egg. Thank you, Bonnie, for looking that up. So that's the bulk of the information of what I have from all of the research, the biggest takeaways, what happens across the time period when you're fasting. Does anybody have any other questions that they want to put in the chat that I am, can answer or share with other people, or comments of what you do that works well for others? That would be great if you could put that in the chat. I'm trying to allow people. I think you can unmute yourselves, but any questions at all? Well, if there are no questions, I appreciate you guys joining me today. Hopefully you learned a little bit about what happens in the body when you're fasting, and the benefits of fasting, and are willing to give it a go. Oh, Deanne says the chat is not opening for her. Well, I am so sorry. Okay, let me see if I can do that. All right. Well, it says the chat is open, Deanne. I'm so sorry. But I did get your answer that the chat is not open. So I did get the question. I did get the comment, but I will pause here and thank you for joining us. And if you want to ask your question on the chat, that would be great. Thank you so much. Uh, Somebody asked if this will be posted for review, and it will be. So we recorded today's talk, and we will send that out with the email that you signed up for this class. And so you can hear the beginning of it. Great question. All right. I don't see any other questions coming to the chat or hear anybody. So thank you so much for joining, and we will see you next time.